social media quite often, in the last few months, people kind of saying things like, can we just skip 2020? It's
Right.
not really all that great. There hasn't been so much good coming of it. People were saying similar things about 2019.
Hmm.
Hey, everybody. Ken Hendricks with Home Instead Senior Care here. Thanks for joining me again today. Today, we're back with the man that helped me kick this whole thing off at the beginning, my friend Ben Thompson. Ben is the owner of Pivotal Consulting. He's a guy who gets real excited about helping individuals, groups, and organizations to reach their full potential. Today, we're going to be chatting about the intriguing idea of thriving in the midst of a pandemic. One thing's for sure, COVID has certainly complicated things for all of us in various ways. Some of us have been affected financially in really dramatic ways, so we certainly want to be sensitive to that. It's not all cupcakes and roses, but I brought Ben on today to inspire and to chat about mindsets that really can benefit us in the midst of whatever we're going through in life. And so please welcome Ben to the show. Thanks for coming on with me, Ben.
Thanks, Ken.
And so last time when you and I kicked these things off, these stay home instead chats, we talked about the concept of pivoting, and we took that from the name of your organization as a launching point. That precursor seems to be a necessity for the ability to thrive in challenging times. And so how has the idea of pivoting played out in your day-to-day work during this COVID era?
Well, in the past, I had this idea that pivoting was something that you did once, or maybe twice, or once in a while. But what I'm discovering, both in my own company and with the clients that I'm working with, is that it's actually an ongoing process, that we never stop looking at the environment around us and what our capabilities are and how we can continually match the two of them together.
Yeah, I can identify with that. Just the need to continually think on our feet and be willing to just see things from a different angle and be open to doing things in different ways than we've been used to doing them in the past. Obviously, I think that before this whole thing that we're all experiencing together, this worldwide phenomenon around the COVID virus and the changes that we've encountered because of that, before that, I think that point would have landed still for most folks,
Mm.
but even more so now, I think. When we were chatting the other day, it became apparent to each of us, at least in that moment, that we both were lucky enough to find ourselves in the midst of pretty productive and inspiring seasons in our lives. And given all that's transpired around the COVID virus and how it's affecting individuals and the business and the economy, you and I know we can say that we're both really blessed to be continuing our work. I don't want to discount the challenges that people are facing in these times, yet we talked about how there's opportunities to be seized in the midst of challenging times and change. Can you share some of your thoughts about that?
Yes. Since our last conversation, I recalled that a friend of mine, Lanny Goodman, had written a 2-page article to kind of contextualize the pandemic. And he referred to it as a crisis. And he compared it to the loss of a loved one, a divorce, losing your job, having to move to a different part of the country due to, say, a climate crisis, and that crises in life are almost always considered to be bad and negative, and we don't want them to happen. And that's our natural reaction to them. But
Yeah.
Lanny's article went on to explain that a crisis, from a very different point of view, is an opportunity to look at our lives from a different point of view. And what's uncomfortable about it is that we're forced to do that. And I think what you and I were trying to get to the other day is if we allow ourselves to be moved by the crisis, then something new happens for us, a new perspective. And then you and I went on to talk about this creative burst that we've both had recently. And to the contrary, if we resist the change in perspective, if we try to hold on to how we've always done things in the past, then there's going to be that resistance that we deal with.
Yeah, yeah. The so-called American spirit is often seen as a fighting spirit, and I think of the fact that to bring that type of fervor to much of life is actually a really admirable thing and a really worthwhile thing. Yet at the core of what we were talking about was something that I see is maybe an easily overlooked pitfall. The fact that in these times, the idea of fighting the changes in our lives that are associated with this COVID era could potentially backfire in ways that prevent us from being pushed out of our boxes or from being pushed out of our comfort zones and into other creative ways of doing things. And so what are the benefits that you see in, like you were saying before, in not resisting our circumstances, but allowing them to draw us out of our comfort zones?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you say fighting spirit or American spirit, I associate that with individuality and wanting to do things one's own way. And I think there's a couple of different levels of that, at least two that we know of. One is, I don't like the way things are going, so I'm going to do them my way. And that can have negative consequences on relationships and health and mental health. But the other sort of individualism is really looking inward and saying, I am clearly in a pivotal moment of my life. What really matters today and what matters most? And can I place my attention on the things that matter, that are ultimately good and healthy for me and the people around me? Um, I have a friend in Albuquerque, Jerry Lujan, who came up with a phrase that the better you get at saying no, the better and faster your business will grow. Now, I took that and I adapted it to my own life situation. And what I came up with was, the better you get at saying no, the better things that matter grow. So that was a conclusion that I came to recently in sort of narrowing my focus on what are the things that matter most, and what am I saying yes to, and what am I saying no to. I'm not sure that I'm really getting to the crux of your question, but that's been my experience over the last 3 weeks.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I'm thinking along the lines with resistance, how saying no to something that is a circumstance that's coming upon us that we have little control over, I think that's where we really run into trouble. And I do feel like I mentioned it before we started recording here, that like I do feel like in some ways I feel like I'm asking you the same question in different just in different words. And that's because this idea of accepting our current circumstances seems to be, it's just something that I enjoy talking about because I feel like it's very valuable for me in my own life. It's proved to be valuable. As you were saying what you were saying there, I was thinking about the fact that it's hard to respond well from a place of contraction, of resistance. And it's, the idea of acceptance or release, from an illusion of control seems to be a much better vantage point. I mean, you may say more to that, from your perspective, but we may have already touched on it in different ways. But from a personal life perspective, as well as from a professional life perspective, how important do you consider acceptance to be? In other words, what is it about resistance toward our current circumstances that can hinder us from overcoming or thriving in the midst of them?
I think there's a consciousness in our country and perhaps in the world that we are heading for new times, and that these new times need to be preceded by new behaviors, new ways of relating, and new ways of doing things. Um, that it's not going to go back to the way it was before. So why would we keep on doing what we've been doing?
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that I'm seeing in my community, in the business community, is a rise in an interest in conscious capitalism. That is, using the machine of capitalism and wealth generation as a leverage to improve the quality of our lives, not as a power, the development of power or personal power. So that's an example of, if we're heading for new times, let's start right now doing things differently, like spending differently and how we earn differently.
Yeah, I woke up this morning thinking about, just from a personal perspective, something that was kind of a blessing to have floating around in my mind this morning was the notion that I shouldn't wait till 2021 to live life. You know, I know it's a joke that I see coming across social media quite often. You know, in the last few months, people kind of saying things like, "Can we just skip 2020? It's
Right.
not really all that great. There hasn't been so much good coming of it." And I get that. We're all, experiencing the difficulties of this era in lots of multifaceted ways. Uh, but I think that, people were saying similar things about 2019.
Hmm.
Like, I think that if we, if we focus in on the difficulties that we're dealing with and allow them to obscure our view of any and all beauty in life, we can find ourselves in this really, really tough situation of grasping for the past or the future, and we never really get to those things. Like, we never get, to relive the past because it's gone, and we never really get to live the future because by the time we're there, it's now. And so I think that this notion of, don't wait to live your life until all of this is back to normal, like you're saying, that whatever that is in the future, it's going to be different. And what it is right now, I think the more that we accept the current circumstances and work within them and try and allow ourselves to see from different perspectives, like we're chatting about, and be open to different ways of doing things, um, I think we can be surprised.
Hmm.
I think that, like, we can be surprised. I know that, I mean, you hear lots of very successful people tell their stories, and of how, they came from where they were to where they are now. And uh, along the way, a lot of times the pieces of the story that they feel were most valuable are not things that are desirable situations. It's a huge life change, like you're saying, like a divorce or the loss of a business that
Mhm.
led to their new idea for their new venture and their new passion that turned into their success. So I think that's real valuable to be thinking about and talking about. But so how can folks get in touch with you, Ben? Do you prefer that they go to your website?
Yeah, I like people to go to my website, which is pivotalconsulting.co, in order to look at the principles that underlie the way that I work, and what my why, how, and what are in this world. My why is to build relationships based in trust. How
Hmm.
I do that is by clarifying complex problems for people, and what I bring is simplicity and scalable solutions. So if that's what folks are interested in, then they can certainly get in touch.
I always find you to be inspiring just on a personal level, just in hearing your insights and, your thoughts and what you've been, how you've been responding to life, on any given day that you and I chat. So I might ask you, everyone's going through all this stuff that we've been dealing with and dealing with different types of issues. What's a piece of inspiration that you might share?
Ken, what has become apparent to me is that for most of my life, I haven't really paid attention to my body, and I find that it has so much wisdom. And so I think the highest advice that I can give right now is to spend some time in meditation, quieting the mind, quieting the emotion, and just sensing what's here now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate you coming on. Have a great day.
You too, Ken. Thank you.